welcome everyone to the November meeting of the Cabinet Housing and Planning Panel. Can everyone hear me over back? Yes? Okay. Before we go into the agenda, I have to read an announcement which we're going to hear at a lot of councils' meetings in the future due to new requirements. The announcement goes: those present at this meeting should be aware that by law it can be recorded by anyone attending. This means the meeting can be filmed, audio recorded, photographed or reported electronically by the use of social media. The Council is itself intending to film and record the proceedings. This does not apply to any part of the meeting that is held in private session. Therefore, anyone present should be aware that they could be recorded at this meeting. Any member of the public who does not wish to be filmed should move to an area of this meeting room away from any camera. Anyone recording must cease as soon as the meeting is declared closed. Is it anyone else's intention to film or record this meeting, please? No? Right. Well, we have a fixed camera, so you're fairly safe probably over there. Right. Turning to the agenda, item 1, substitution of members.
Two substitutions this evening, Chair. Councillor Peary for Councillor Storer and Councillor Thompson for Councillor Trick.
Thank you. Apologies
From Councillor Storer and Trick.
Item 3, minutes.
I'm afraid, Chair, that the minutes
They're
have
delayed.
not been circulated, been delayed, so not available for signing.
We'll do those another time. Item 4, notification of urgent business. None that I know of. 5, declaration of interest by members. No. Item 6.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm sure the county council is mentioned somewhere.
Yeah, okay. Item 6, public question time and petitions. Now this evening we have 2 questions, and the first question is from Mr. D. McBride. Mr. McBride here. I think you know the procedure, don't you?
Just a little bit.
Does the Council stand by the evidence from the 2009 WCS infrastructure document on sewage and drinking water, which is this Council's infrastructure document found within its evidence base either now in its own document or part of the Atkins document on the Council website? Do they accept what is written within as sound evidence for use in this local emerging core strategy and local plan for housing in Welwyn Hatfield to base its judgment of the 2009 WCS on building on as sound evidence for development of the Panshanger Aerodrome, Hilly Fields, Panshanger Village and 67% of Welwyn Garden City from Howlands through Panshanger to the outer edge of the Rymeads catchment area?
Thank you, Mr. McBride. The answer reads: at the present time, the 2009 water cycle study for the Rymeads catchment area and the water cycle scoping study 2010 remain the most up-to-date comprehensive pieces of evidence informing the need for improvements to sewerage infrastructure required due to the potential housing growth in the catchment area, including growth in and around Welwyn Garden City. There is no current plan to carry out a full update of these studies. The Council is, however, in contact with Thames Water, Affinity Water and the Environment Agency as part of its continuing work on the local plan, and in particular on the associated infrastructure delivery plan. Any comments received from these bodies regarding the need for work to update either of the studies will be taken seriously. The Council will work with those bodies and with neighbouring authorities as required to ensure that any local plan proposals for substantial housing growth at Welwyn Garden City are soundly based in terms of the demands likely to be placed on sewerage infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you.
And question 2 is for Mr. D. Dixon. Mr. Dixon here? No? Right. In that case, I'll read out Mr. Dixon's question and the response. Item number 12, the local plan update of the report of the Director, Strategy and Development, to the Cabinet Housing and Planning Panel, 13th of November 2014, states at paragraph 9.19, page 67, that a workshop is being held 14th of November with landowners of key potential strategic sites around Welwyn Garden City and Hatfield. 3 of the key sites are Hatch 1, Hatch 2 and WGC 4 and are all in what is known as the gravel belt. The position of the Mineral Authority, that is Hertfordshire County Council, is that they will not allow the gravel at those sites to be sterilised by building on the sites, and therefore will require the gravel to be removed before any new homes are built at these sites. Having seen the survey results of the vast amount of the gravel at these sites provided by Hertfordshire County Council, it would appear impossible that the gravel can be extracted, the subsequent void filled and be developed by 2031. Can the Council therefore confirm that the Council has carried out surveys of the amount of gravel at these sites that prove the Hertfordshire County Council are not correct, and that the gravel can be extracted and the void filled and developed by 2031, or if not, these sites will not be deliverable and should not be included in the draft local plan? And the response is, there are ongoing discussions with Hertfordshire County Council as the Minerals Planning Authority about these and other sites. Where relevant, the Council has asked for evidence to be submitted to the County Council, and where this information is available, we've considered it when looking at the assessment of sites. This Council has not carried out mineral surveys of the sites. This would be the responsibility of the landowner in discussion with Hertfordshire County Council. To date, the evidence submitted has demonstrated that it is possible to extract minerals where these are viable and develop sites within the planned period. That's the end of questions. Now, we are going to please some, irritate others. We're now going to jump to item 12, which commences on page 63. So, Sue, I think you're going to handle this one.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is the latest in a series of reports which updates members on the progress on work on the technical evidence to support the local plan. And the report focuses on 3 pieces of work: transport modelling work, infrastructure delivery plan, and viability assessment work. You will recall with regards to the transport modelling that this was a requirement of the Highways Agency and the Highways Authority that additional transport modelling work was carried out to inform the preparation of the local plan. And you can see from the report that actually quite a lot of work has now taken place, that the base transport model has been completed, and that a number of scenarios have been tested, both with and without mitigation. But the work has not yet been completed, and it has still to be signed off by the Highways Agency, and we're hoping to have a meeting with them next week just to clarify the position with regards to the model. But it is clear from the work that's been carried out to date that a number of junction improvements will be required around the borough in order to accommodate development and to address congestion associated with the levels of growth that would arise from development. With regards to the infrastructure delivery plan, you will recall that there was a draft infrastructure delivery plan published with the Emerging Core Strategy, and the work that went to inform that is in the process of being updated to take account of higher housing targets and a different distribution. And the report sets out what progress has been made with regards to updating this. A number of meetings have already taken place, but we're still waiting feedback from another of key service providers with regards to any issues that there might be with regards to the amount of growth and the location and distribution of growth. And the report details some of the issues which have emerged with regards to education, transport and green infrastructure. But I think it's important to note that In the main, this relates to the quantum of development around any particular settlement rather than specific locations. So that's particularly true for education. With schools, it's not so much where the site is, but is there capacity within the settlements and within the schools in that capacity, in that settlement to absorb additional pupils? Is there sufficient critical mass to provide a new primary school or a new secondary school associated with the level of growth? So, as you can see, this work has not yet been completed, and indeed, as we don't yet have a definitive target, we won't be able to complete that work until we have a target in place. And that's not likely to be confirmed until we have finalised the local plan and we're ready with the proposed submission version of the local plan. So it's an ongoing iterative piece of work. And the same is very much true for the viability work, because that also is informed by the amount of infrastructure that you're required to provide, because that obviously affects viability. The work that's been done comprises of two different aspects. One, to look at the viability of the policies which were set out in the emerging core strategy, and in general they're considered to be viable, although the consultants do recommend that the policies should be flexible so that any individual specific issues can be addressed. And then secondly, viability work is looking at some of the strategic locations where clearly there will be a lot of infrastructure required in association with those sites. And that work has not yet been complete, and as I say, cannot be complete until the infrastructure work has been completed. Thank you.
Members? Questions?
Comment? Duncan.
Yes, a couple. First of all, on page 67, paragraph 914 at the top, I appreciate, as you say, that it's early days. We don't even know what the local plan is going to be, let alone what the infrastructure is going to be. But we mentioned that the enhanced basic model has been submitted to Herts County Council and the Highways Agency for comment. And I suppose that raises the whole thing. We've got these consultants in. Sooner or later, sometime next year, the local plan will crystallise and we'll be able to build a plan around that. But how can we hold people like HCC and the Highways Agency to account? It's something we ought to begin to think about. Do we have the right to summon certain senior officers from those agencies here and say, right, no development can take place until this, that and the other is done? I don't in my own mind know how we're going to do that, because I fear that we will create a lot of paper and studies and this, that and the other, but have no means of enforcing delivery.
Well, it is quite likely when so for example, if a site needs to have associated mitigation work, so various junction improvements surrounding the site or within the site, then there's when the planning application is approved, there is likely to be a legal agreement, a Section 106 agreement, which would require sums of money in order to ensure that those highway improvements take place. And this is the sort of thing that has happened in the past. Those bodies who would be responsible for delivering those highway improvements would also be party to the legal agreement. So, they would be required to spend the money on specific schemes.
But that's at the point of individual detailed development application,
Yes.
not the local plan. Is that the application to develop comes after the local plan is crystallised, doesn't it?
In the main, yes.
Yes,
Yes, it is.
Okay.
The Highways Agency and the County Council are statutory consultees. They will be asked to comment on the local plan,
Yeah.
and their representations will be considered by the inspector at any examination in public. So they, in all likelihood, well, I can't guarantee it, but in all likelihood, they would be appearing at the examination and giving evidence at the examination, should there be any issues.
Just as an example, following some resident contact in at the Garden Village, the section that hasn't yet been adopted, I'm just about managing to get a street light connected to the mains 14 years after the houses were built. Obviously that's quite a small scale problem. And I just fear we might get to the local plan being crystallised without any actual ability to force people to deliver.
Just in terms of working with the county council, we obviously have political and officer relationships with them, and we meet their highways officers on a regular basis, so we have that ongoing dialogue. There is a protocol in place between the county council and all the authorities in Hertfordshire in terms of them involving themselves in transport modelling and the relationship in terms of developing the local plan. So we do have that in place, and there will also be other means we are considering. So potentially, you may be aware we are allowed planning performance agreements in the preparation of planning applications. We are also considering whether that would be a useful mechanism to discuss with landowners promoting large sites on an entirely without prejudice basis to agree a planning performance agreement to work on master planning in the run-up to the preparation of the submission local plan. So we can work with those landowners, and that would bring in the county council. The Highways Agency is slightly harder because we have fewer relationships with them and they operate at the national level, but as Sue said, we have got a meeting lined up, we do have contacts and we do engage with them, and we will push them to assist us in the preparation of that document, and they will have to because they're the authority responsible for the A1M, and we will have a route to approach them as well. So we do have mechanisms in place for next year to ensure those conversations take place and we are comfortable with their views before we bring a local plan to you to demonstrate it is viable and deliverable.
Okay, thanks. My only other point was on page 71, paragraph 946. This goes back to a point I made on the 15th of October when looking at the two big sites in Hatfield and also to a lesser extent Welwyn Garden City, that they were so big compared to all the other sites that I felt there was a danger not being judged in the right way. Now, if you look at the last sentence in paragraph 946 about the need to do these appraisals, I have no problem with it, but it says this is important because the delivery of the selected larger sites around the two towns in particular is critical to the council's efforts to meet its objectively assessed need. Have we created 3 or 4 sites that are just too big to fail? And therefore I have this fear that we're walking into a consultation kind of thinking, well, whatever happens, we might be able to listen to people's points for this site, that site, maybe add 100 here, 50 there, but for these big sites, sorry, if we take one of them out, boom, the whole thing collapses. Which is why I felt that we can't obviously physically break the site up. If someone's brought forward a site for 2,000, that's what's happened. But at least parcel them up into their classifications of more favourable, finely balanced, less favourable, rejected, etc. Spread the thing across, because otherwise I fear we're boxing ourselves in, so that if we go into this and then people make a series of objections, as they will, or suppose this gravel problem raised by Mr. Dixon is not, it becomes a showstopper, we've got nowhere to go. So I just think it's obviously not something we can resolve here and now. I'd just like to put it on the table again that I believe we need, because of the size of some of these sites, we need to look at a way of handling them and breaking them down, so it's not an all or nothing. I'm not saying take them out, I'm just saying we don't want a situation where we have 2,000 or nothing. I think
You're saying they're too important.
They're too important. We can't have sites that are too important to fail. We have to go into this thinking people will respond to the consultation, they will make points, some of which will be valid, and we will have to listen to them. If we get 2 equally valid objections, we can't say, well, a site of 50, all right, we'll take it out. But a site of 2,000, sorry, can't do that. Rather like banks, we don't want things that are too big to fail. So could we just think about that again? Thank you.
Helen.
Thank you. Following on from something Councillor Bell said in his first question, what mechanism will there be to ensure that if the Education Authority have said they will deliver a school, that it is delivered? And also the Health Authority, if they've said they will deliver health facilities and GP practices, etc. Again, what mechanism will there be to make sure that they are delivered?
Again, it will be through legal agreement. One of the proposals is to also introduce a community infrastructure levy, and if those authorities want to receive any money from that source, they will have to sign up to a delivery agreement to actually deliver the infrastructure that would be required.
Okay, and if I can just clarify that, please, delivering those within the borough, not external to the borough.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Super.
Welcome.
Thank you. When we had the plan of all the meetings we were going to have laid out, I was expecting, frankly, a bit more on the infrastructure than we've got here. I couldn't see anything about the A1, maybe that's because the Highways Agency will tell us whether that's going to clog up or not, and it's not something that can be done. Is it? Yeah. Yeah, it's mentioned, but I mean, it doesn't say, oh, you know, junction 3 will be fine, but junction 4 won't be, or whatever, which is sort of information I thought might have been useful. I mean, particularly I think of things like the roundabouts in Welledge, right, near the motorway there, which tend to get pretty clogged in the rush hour now. I'm surprised they're not mentioned. It talked about, for example, but I would have liked to have seen something clearer, you know, a map showing the degree of congestion that was expected, so that you can actually pick up local knowledge. You know, Keith might come along and say, well, actually, you know, fine, but I don't think you've got this one quite right. It doesn't seem intuitively to be what I'd expect. And we're sort of, I think we're sort of slightly missing a trick there in terms of having the specific information. In terms of liaising with Highways Agency, well, best of luck. Helen and I have sat in more than one meeting with the Highways Agency and found them to be, frankly, a disgraceful outfit. Lying, and I don't use the word, you know, without thinking about it, they were lying to us on a number of occasions, and I really, you know, the lack of any kind of oversight of what they do and the pace at which they do it really, really worries me, because I think, you know, we could get caught out there. I was hoping there might have been something about flooding and remediation. We heard a very powerful argument previous meeting from people in Water End that if we did any development in Brooklands Park, it would greatly exacerbate the flooding issues that they've got down there. You know, that's something we've got to take very seriously, as Kieran said last time. But I'm an optimist, and I think, you know, if you do the right things, it may not result in a problem, because there surely are things you can do, but there isn't a reference to that. I think that would have been helpful to give us a better understanding of whether flooding is likely to be made worse down there if anything happens, or if in fact it can be worked around, as one would imagine intuitively that it ought to be able to be. I mean, are we going to see something specific about the highways issues before we sign this off, or it's brought before us sign off? Because we appear to be constantly saying everything's next time.
Well, yes, I mean, what we wanted to do was to have the outputs of the model signed off by the Highways Agency and the Highways Authority. So it just to me premature to have brought anything at this stage, but assuming, you know, we're there, we should be able to bring that to the next meeting.
And part of the challenge is because what we are going to put forward in the consultation document is the judgments of sites as more favourable, less favourable, finely balanced. If we were to model those, it looks like a done deal, and we are not at that stage. We are putting those out for consultation to get the views of statutory bodies, businesses, residents, the community, and at that point, once we have all of that information, everything begins to come together over the course of next year. We tighten up the transport modelling, we tighten up the flooding knowledge, we tighten up the infrastructure knowledge, and begin to cost based upon sites that, as officers, we are minded to propose to councillors, and as we begin to prepare that final document, it all comes together. But there is the risk of jumping the gun, spending an awful lot of money modelling one particular transport scenario that then is amended over the course of next year, and we don't want to waste public money in that way. So we are attempting to bring it all together, set out the strategic knowledge, and slowly draw everything together so that the document and the sites that we begin to favour as officers and begin to recommend to this committee and others, we relate to the infrastructure implications and make sure it all works as a sound document.
And bringing forward more detail.
Yes, yeah.
Sorry, Keith was first.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to follow on from what Councillor Bromley was stating regarding medical facilities. With some of these developments in certain areas, they're going to have effects on doctors' surgeries. Now, the surgery in my village several years ago applied to extend their premises. They're on Greenbelt and it was refused. What are we going to do in a case like that?
In that particular circumstances, there are two routes. That body can promote the release of that land from the Greenbelt to grow, or they can submit a planning application with the land in the Greenbelt and demonstrate, or we can judge, if we so decide, that there are very special circumstances to allow that development in the Greenbelt.
Oh, right, okay.
Your
thank
turn
you.
again.
Following on from what you were saying about highways, can I just have some clarification? My understanding is that we have had to do some of the transport modelling to put forward, and yet we are always told at every meeting we cannot tell the Highways Authority what to do. So there seems to be conflict there.
This, it's been joint work, jointly commissioned by ourselves and the County Council. The County Council have funded the base model, and then we funded the testing of different scenarios. So that's how it's worked.
But if we feel one thing and the Highways Authority feels another aspect is more important, who has the last say?
Well, they are the highway authority.
Yeah, thank you. That's
Push comes to shove at least. Okay. Margaret.
Thank you. On page 65 it says transport modelling for in Hatfield. So I just wanted to go into 9 through 10 on page 66 where it says here, and it's following on from what Malcolm was saying. It says the model does not consider in detail the traffic impacts of growth in the villages and rural areas of the borough, where local access considerations are an important factor in the decision to allocate sites in these areas. It says they'll be covered by separate technical work and advice from Herts County Council. So hopefully that work will go ahead, because that raises concerns. I was just picking up from what Malcolm was saying about having a really good working relationships with Herts County Council to look at this, I think it will have quite an impact on the villages. And then I wanted to go on to page 68 on the education discussions with Herts County Council again, because they're the education authority. And under 9.28 it said, at the time of the emerging core strategy indicated, they were saying that one new secondary school in Welwyn Garden City, one in Hatfield, they're saying would be a requirement, as well as several new primary schools would be required to serve the level of growth that's envisaged. The housing strategies emerging through the local plans for a higher number of dwellings overall. So, if we look at the potential, I've been to meetings at Herts County Council where there's been discussions about potential growth and looking at the future, because the population has increased, there are more children, and as Astrid was saying about the school that her son goes to, that's full, and if the schools are full, they can expand slightly, but there is going to be demand for more schools. I think that's such an important discussion. This document, I know we don't have a definitive target, and the infrastructure delivery plan, it's not completed. I'm just thinking, this is our third meeting, and it's going out for public consultation in January. How far down will this document be before it goes out for public consultation?
Well, it won't be definitive in terms of where new schools will be provided. In some instances, some of the larger locations, so some of the strategic locations, there are specific proposals to provide new primary schools and secondary schools within some of those locations. But with regards to the smaller sites, it's not always, they don't always have the room to make provision for primary school provision. I think one of the challenges in terms of preparing the local plan document and identifying the infrastructure needs is that you don't tend to get, it's difficult to engage with infrastructure providers until they know precisely what you're proposing. But you want the information in order to inform what you're proposing. And we're sort of in this chicken and egg position. So we won't have a definitive position from the infrastructure providers in time for this consultation. But what it will do, because they are key consultees as well, what it will do is mean that we will get a formal response to the consultation from those providers. So it is quite useful in terms of getting a definitive position from those providers.
I think the other complication is when they're near our boroughs, we've got other districts that have also got an interest, just to make the pot boil. Sorry, Ashley.
I've noticed something on page 71, paragraph 9.45, the decision on whether to seek a proportion of the affordable housing requirement at traditional social rent levels is made on a site-by-site basis. I thought that if it was above a certain amount of dwellings, that there had to be a certain percentage of affordable housing. And so is that not the case?
Well, that's your starting point. But if the applicant is able to demonstrate their viability issues, then it may be that a lower percentage is accepted. So in general, your starting point is the percentage that is set out in the policy. But if there are viability issues, then it might be that that percentage would come down.
So who would decide which site? It's a site-by-site basis. Who would be making the decisions about where there should be social housing and where there shouldn't? How does that work?
Well, it would be at the planning application stage, so the applicant would have to provide sufficient evidence to demonstrate that there were issues, and then it would be determined at that stage.
Stephen.
Thank you. Actually, just following up on that point, I haven't yet understood why there are different percentages for social housing and why the villages should have 35%. But I won't go on about that now. We will no doubt argue that later. What I would say, though, is that, you know, to the man or woman on the Brooklands Park omnibus, once a week, the questions of roads and access, drainage, schools, and medical,
They're all there.
all very important, very important. But we're going out to consultation, and we will have to say we're reserving these matters. We don't have the answers to these. We'd like your opinions back, but we can't tell you the answers to your questions. And everybody will write back and say, well, what about schools and roads and houses and drainage? Well, we won't know. So there's two ways we can look at it. Either people write back and say, well, what about the roads and so on? Or we will assume, the population will assume that the questions of what to do about the roads and the drainage and the schools and the medical care can be sorted out. And so looking at 7 or 8 sites around Brooklands Park and same in Welland Green and Cuffley, people will have to take the view that the infrastructure and all the questions to do with the infrastructure can be sorted out. Now, am I right in this? I mean, this is what I'm asking you. Do they have to take that view? Because otherwise we're consulting on a half a question.
I'm sure we would like it to leave, but for a funny feeling in this country it will follow.
Yeah.
It will be both, as you say. There will be occasions where, if we assume the sites come first, so we pick the best sites based upon the merits of that site versus the merits of another site, and then look at the infrastructure implications, it may not be possible to solve the infrastructure for that site for various reasons, simply the cost. Or if you're going to build 100 homes in a village and a primary school in that village is at capacity, 100 homes won't afford you an extension to that school. So it may be that we have to look and come at it from the other direction. We need a new primary school. How many homes do we have to build for that primary school to be affordable? So it may be that the development choices we have to make are made in order to ensure that the infrastructure can be delivered. And that presents challenges in terms of the merits of large sites to consume their own smoke versus the smaller sites where you may have to have a number of cumulative small sites in order to generate the critical mass, both in terms of the number of people and the finance, in order to solve the infrastructure issue that they generate.
This is how the Soviet Union worked, isn't it? Or didn't.
Okay.
But if I'm just finish that one, doing it that way, saying, right, well, we need 10,000 people and 10,000 homes and we need 2 primary schools, or we need big sites to put them in Hatfield, therefore we'll put 2 primary schools in Hatfield because they've got big enough sites. Or you say, well, we need a primary school, but we'll bus everybody from Coupling, Brooklands Park, Littleheath, Welham Green to somewhere else. So the people who live there can't go to the local school. That happens at the moment, of course.
Yeah.
People who live in the roads of the schools actually get bused to schools several miles away, and people who live several miles away get bused to schools.
Or you build more houses in Brooklands Park and Tuffley.
Yes, and get
That would be logical.
The reality is that this debate will have to conclude which is the more preferable scenario. That's the reality of this debate.
But the whole point I was making is by the time we get up to consultation, which isn't very long now, we won't have the answers to the questions on infrastructure.
But it will be important that within that consultation people say, yes, but we need, or no, we must have.
Yeah.
Yes,
So that message is delivered loud and clear.
The argument is the demand
and
comes
that's
first.
that's certainly a point that people made in response to the last consultation. That's one of the reasons for preparing an infrastructure delivery plan, which is something new for the local plan process. The last district plan wasn't accompanied by an infrastructure delivery plan. So it does at least provide an opportunity to try and address some of these issues and to have these conversations with the various service providers. So we are moving forward, but not quite as speedily as we would perhaps like.
The only alternative is to come to you with a near complete plan with all our perceived answers, which cuts out the opportunity for public consultation, in which case the accusation is, well, this is all a done deal, and that does fall into your Soviet Union bracket of how things could
Let's not be too unkind. Yeah.
Thank you. Adding to what Stephen said, what worries me is that it was obvious from the first meeting that the majority of the concerns were about the infrastructure, and you're absolutely right. If we then can't provide that information prior to the consultation commencing, I would imagine a lot of residents will just not want to engage because actually they're commenting on something that they only have half the information for. So it is a real worry, and I don't know how you're going to be able to convince residents that actually we will be able to provide the information when it's needed, when actually the majority would say they need it up front.
Thank you.
Come on, Kieran. Give it a go.
I was only an 11-year-old, I think, when the Soviet Union broke up. The thing I remember is everyone laughing at them because they had lots of potholes in their roads. I wonder if they laugh at us now. And to stick to it, wouldn't it be great if we could do it a different way? Wouldn't it be great if we could just say we need 10,500 affordable homes, therefore that's what we're going to build. We need a hospital, therefore we're going to build it there. We need X amount of schools, we're going to put them there. And people can go to their local school instead of crisscrossing the borough to go to different ones they choose to go to. If you need shops here, we'll put them there. Wouldn't it be great if we could do that rather than having to sort of kowtow to the market and what people want and what's viable? Obviously, what's viable is how much money it can make for someone. Wouldn't it be great if we could just do it for need, not greed, and build the houses and the infrastructure that we needed? But that'd be far too
Okay. Malcolm.
Yeah, I mean, clearly all the districts in the county are going at broadly the same rates, so they will, it might be possible to go to the county and say, can we have some kind of statement about there will be enough places locally, not necessarily next door, but you know, that gives
reasonably convenient.
Yeah, something like that. A form of words that people might think is of some value. Clearly, it's harder with some of the more remote
Malcolm, you found yourself a job.
Not my pay grade, I can tell you. Clearly, it's harder with the more remote bodies like the NHS, Highways Agency, and so on and so forth. So that may not work there. The other thing I wanted to pick up there was what Astrid started, which was this business about viability. I mean, you know, having studied economics many years ago, it seems to me that the value of a piece of land is what you'll get in terms of what you can put on it, minus the costs that you incur.
The residual
doing
value.
it. Yes, the residual value. Therefore, if we say pretty solidly we're going for 30% or 35%, whatever number is thought to be relevant in that particular location, surely that ought to stick. I mean, it seems to me the only way it doesn't stick is if basically the developer has paid too much for the land in the first place, in which case you say that's your problem, not ours. You know, when we write all these statements down about being flexible, it just seems to me we're opening the door for every single person to come along and say, mine's an exception, by the way. And vast amounts of time are expended by officers. And at the end of the day, they're reducing the portion of you know, affordable homes that we're going to get. And it just worries me that there's so much qualification being started about being flexible, when actually the answer is, you know, in a free market, it's the landowner that takes the cost. If we impose more obligations, then the value of the land becomes lower, and it's their choice as to whether the land comes forward for development. They can't say, oh, the costs are too great, it doesn't work.
Malcolm, many years ago when I worked for a living, I was a valuer, and it's called development gain, and governments over the, I won't say over the centuries, but over the decades have always had ideas about development gain, and it never ever works. It's so logical, as you've explained it, it is so logical that in fact nothing happens. And the worst example ever made was something called the Land Commission. And that was a great scheme which we'd probably all be in favour of, or maybe, whereby if there was land to be developed and the developer not to do it, it was compulsory acquired and developed. And I think over the life of the Land Commission, they bought about 2 sites. It just stops it all happening, unfortunately, because you're back to greed.
I think in terms of affordable housing and some of the other requirements, when we first produce the local plan, the viability evidence we have to support it will be fresh and up to date. So the policies, the targets we put in for the first 2, 3, 5 years will remain solid, and we will have good evidence to argue for those targets, whatever they may be. As the plan progresses and the policies age, they need that element of flexibility. Flexibility is required by the government to take account of the fact that circumstances may change. And the option we may have when we present that evidence to you is, do we go for the highest target that we can achieve based upon the evidence, or do we set a slightly lower target but one that we believe is robust for a much longer period of the plan period? So, you know, if it could be pushed to 35 but actually 30 is a more stable and guaranteeable target, should that be the target we go for? And when we present that evidence, we'll be able to have that debate and what policy stance you would prefer and how much flexibility is written into that policy.
Right, I would urge that those sort of words that you've uttered are actually in the document at the end, that says we've done the research and this demonstrates, rather than, oh, we think we might need to give here and give there, because this actually, to me, doesn't look very encouraging.
Okay. Anything else? Right, well, we're asked to note the content of the report and its appendices in advance of a report being presented to the panels and service public consultation document scheduled for publication early next year. Is that agreed? Mm-hmm. That's good. Now if we can go on to item number 13. Is that you again, Sue?
It is, I'm afraid, yes.
It's your voice back again now.
Thank you. Well, some St Albans City and District Council are currently out to consultation on their strategic local plan, and the consultation runs for 6 weeks and closes on the 23rd of November. So as it's a strategic document, it's similar to our emerging core strategy, so it doesn't contain proposals for development management policies or the full range of site allocations that you get in a full local plan. The report sets out a number of issues and concerns that we feel we should raise with St Albans Council. And the first two issues really relate to the preparation of their strategic housing market assessment. Firstly, that there really has been a lack of engagement with any of the neighbouring authorities. I mean, we prepared our own strategic housing market assessment, but we did consult with the adjoining authorities during its preparation, whereas to date there really hasn't been any consultation with neighbouring authorities, and we think that will be an issue for St Albans in moving forward with their local plan, and something which they will need to rectify. And given that they've attended one of our duty to cooperate meetings, I am hopeful that this will be possible, but that is an issue we need to raise with them. And then also in terms of the production of their housing market assessment, they've not really taken any account of any economic scenarios in coming up with a housing target, and I think that will be another issue for them going forward with their local plan document. Then we come on to the third issue raised in the report, which really relates to how they've arrived at their housing target and the relationship between their housing target and the objective assessment. And really there is a lack of clarity in the document as to how they've derived their housing target, when it would appear that there are more sites which are suitable and deliverable within their area, and which would meet the objective assessment which was actually recommended by their consultants. So it's not clear why they've arrived at that particular figure. Nor is it clear whether the development to the east of Hemel Hempstead is actually to meet their needs or Decorum's needs. When the inspector concluded on the examination of the Decorum core strategy, he did recommend that there should be a comprehensive review of the green belt, which should involve East Hart, St Albans. So clearly there was an expectation that if there was to be growth to the east of Hemel Hempstead, then that some of that should be meeting the needs of Decorum. So it needs to be absolutely clear in the document whose housing figures are they. And then just in terms of relationship with Welwyn Hatfield, you'll remember when we considered our own evidence, the strategic housing market assessment, which identified our wider housing market area, some of which overlapped with St Albans. What's not clear for us is actually how many dwellings are intended to be provided within that area of overlap. I think, if I remember correctly, our study sort of identified a need for about 2,500 dwellings, I think, of that order. And clearly there's one strategic location which I think would deliver around 1,000 dwellings within that area. But we don't know what the urban capacity figures are for that area, so we don't know if there's going to be a shortfall within that segment of our wider housing market area. So that will then be an issue for us at our examination, because the inspector will be looking at whether we're meeting our needs, but also how the wider housing market area needs are being addressed. So we need clarity on that. And then in terms of their approach towards employment, I think it's to be welcomed that they're proposing a strategy of not releasing any further employment land, because in the past they have released quite substantial areas of employment land. But it's unclear what is meant by some of their needs for jobs or employment being met by the wider area. There's no definition of their functional economic market area. Is the expectation actually that Welwyn Hatfield will be meeting some of their jobs needs, and we just need clarity on that and what is precisely meant by that sentence. And then finally, whilst I refer to making provision for gypsy and traveller pitches, there is no target in the document, so it's unclear precisely what level of need they would be planning to meet, and that's something else we should be seeking clarity on. Thank you.
Okay. Questions? Mrs. Dawkins? No.
Yeah, I'm not clear what their target is. Is it this 4,000 homes, or is that just part of the total, you know, one segment? Because I mean, I seem to recall Roger Triggs, you know, both the previous meetings claiming that their numbers were similar to ours, and 4,000 is nothing like our number.
No, it is. No, that's the amount in the green belt.
Right.
So maybe they
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So do we know overall what their number is?
We do. Sorry, I just don't think it's in the report, so I don't have it to hand. I think it was reported to the last meeting.
I think, as I recall, their objective need, one of their objective need figures was about 11,000 in their study, and they've selected something near 8,000 from memory.
Yes, it was that one.
They're looking at building 436 each year, rather than the 7. So
That's
it's 20 year.
8,500.
So
Yeah.
On a population significantly bigger than here.
it's a lower percentage
Very
of growth.
because no one wants to live in St Kilda.
Yeah, I mean, quite interesting, under 9.8, they've clearly plumped for the very lowest
Yep.
rate.
Saw that before.
Now, part of you says, okay, we've got to be careful where they overlap with us. But otherwise, it seems there's a danger of poking around in someone else's local plan if they'll poke around in ours. And part of me says, if they plump for the lowest, that may not be very logical. If they get away with it, that might be an interesting point. You know, good luck with it. If they don't, tough, it's not our problem. If they get away with it, is that something we should think about?
I think looking at recent local plan and effect decisions, I don't think they'd be likely to get away with it.
But that's not our problem, is it? That's for them to find out.
Well, what you have to remember is that when it comes to the examination of our local plan, what the inspector will be looking at is what the population needs are arising, not only from within Wenham Hatfield, but from the adjoining areas as well. Is there a shortfall in the adjoining areas, in which case should Wenham Hatfield be picking up that gap? So it could be an issue for us.
Right. Well, we're asked to accept this as the basis for the response to St Albans, and the head of planning be given delegated powers to agree to the consultation response. The effective member. Agreed, everyone? Good, thank you very much. Right. Okay, thanks. Right, well, we have an option now. I suppose we've got to go back to item 7, which is the...
I think the lady on my left wants to leave
No,
sometime.
that's okay, that's fine.
No,
don't
she
worry.
usually goes first, ma'am.
I do, I have my
She's
first
very
go
patient.
first.
She has been with us for a long time. Our fault. Right.
Okay, well, we can be very quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's we won't.
Good.
Even
That's
better.
word, Sean.
Would you like a microphone or can you speak loudly?
I can speak loudly, can you hear?
I think better have a microphone.
Oh, okay. I'll stop. Shall we sit there?
Okay.
And then what happens when John needs to speak? Because
It's a roving mic, Sean.
Here we are, we have this one
It's the
now.
roving X Factor.
my Gloria Gaynor moment. Yeah.
Right, I understand at the last meeting when the first quarter report was considered that members commented that they thought maybe they only needed to see this level of detail twice a year rather than 4 times a year. So if you're still happy with that proposal, what we've discussed is that it would be more appropriate to see the second quarter and the last quarter, so you're actually getting the end of year results, if you like. Hence why we're back this time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
So we'll skip quarter 3. But what we were going to suggest is that for Q3 we would come with something which was more service-based to give a little bit more interest. So we would focus on a particular area of the service, and it would also give us the opportunity to still report on any really key performance indicators that, in the view of members and for governance purposes, it would be important to see before the 6-month period has expired, because there are some very key figures here that can change quite quickly, and if you don't see them for 6 months, then that, you know, governance-wise, that's not great, because ultimately, don't forget, we are responsible as a local authority. So does that sound like a reasonable proposal? Are you sort of happy with that approach?
After all, this is the conduit back to the council.
Exactly, and in terms of our performance management framework and governance arrangements, I mean, the setting up of the trust initially was a significant governance risk for us, and part of the mitigation to that was that we report on a regular basis to members. So if you're happy with that, you can either suggest to me which key performance indicators you really want to see, or I can suggest to you what I think they ought to be. And there's 5 or 6 that I think you really ought to see, but happy to take suggestions.
I think the important thing, Sian, are those wonderful words, no nasty surprises. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So we will use our judgment, but I think, you know, there will be some obvious ones, like things like gas servicing, where if it's not happening, then the breach in the law means that somebody could end up
and we were
seriously injured and somebody else could end up in jail. Yeah. Okay, so we'll do that for next time, and then over to John for any queries you've got on this report.
Yes, I mean, I'm conscious of the time, and that we're all well into the meeting and there are people waiting, so rather than go through the report in detail, because I think to pick up John's point, I don't think there are any nasty surprises in there. I don't think there's anything I particularly highlight in terms of exception reporting. Most of the performance is at least as good as last time, when I think we didn't find any great challenges in there. More than happy to take any questions though that anybody's come along with.
I think they are fairly clear, John. They are pretty easily understood too. They're not sort of hieroglyphics as some things tend to be. Margaret.
Yes. I just wanted to say that housing's always produced the most informed targets. However, there's just a couple of things I'd like to ask. Oh, sorry, page 9, where it says number of tenants evicted for renters, and it says here that data shows to properties the first it's slightly higher than previous, but overall repossessions are lower compared to other organisations. Who are the other organisations? That would be interesting.
Yes, we're a member of an organisation called Housemark, rather, and they benchmark all those members. So in terms of arm's length management organisations like ourselves, I think there are about a dozen in there. But in terms of housing associations and local authorities, the last time I looked at the numbers, it's approaching 300 across the country, and we are, in terms of statistically, our performance is in the highest quartile, and in fact it's very high in the highest quartile. We pick very few people compared with other landlords. So that's where we get that data from. We used to actually bring that here.
That's what I was going to ask, how is this information gathered to make a comparison?
It goes to our board once a year, and it's becoming more and more difficult since the demise of the Audit Commission, because they used to actually audit those figures to make sure that people were gathering them properly, and that's now gone. So there are only a few of these performance indicators now that can sensibly be compared nationally, but those do tend to be ones that are checked.
So you get global figures and your own, but the others aren't named. Is that it?
Sorry? Yes.
The global figures and your own, but the others aren't named.
It's a bit more than that, because you can work with a family of other organisations that you deem to be very similar to yourself,
Yep.
So you can go in small clubs as well within that.
Okay.
But yes, that's the basis.
Sorry,
page 10, where it says the tenants who are under-occupying, better known as the bedroom tax. We bring this up at each meeting because it shows us some information, and I've always asked how many households are affected. And I know you've got here a total target of 80. I think it was 50 before the target, but it says here that the number of moves achieved for downsizing for the first 6 months was 38 against the target 40, I suppose 40 twice as 80. And it was just having a little bit more information. I know Sean said that we're going to look at areas to bring so that we can look at the information. I think this one was one that I would be interested in seeing more data on how many households are affected.
Can certainly do that.
Good.
That's something.
That's my last question.
Sorry.
It was on the
Margaret's
gas,
having a run here.
No, the gas servicing, and I can see that the target is slightly lower than it hasn't been met. And I was just interested in when did TSG start the new contract? Because it ties in with the responsive, something to do with on page 26, where it says not in a position to report the indicator about a repair call answering the software or something to do with the telephony and then the gas contract. Does that all tie in?
No, it doesn't, no. Well, it does slightly. In terms of gas servicing, I think the point that was touched on earlier in terms of assurance, I suppose, the most important thing is have we gas serviced all of our properties? The good news is under TSG we have, and we've now reached 100%. So in that sense, in terms of people's safety and also whether I go to prison or not, it's 100% is what you're looking for, and that did fall away under the last contract towards the end, and motivating a contractor towards the end is a challenge. But that was very quickly brought up to 100% with the new contract, and I think most of the performance is meeting target. I think the only area is around responsive repairs and the appointments made and kept. They're quite good on the servicing. You'll see that's 100% because that is very much appointment based. Responding to repairs, if TSG were here, they'd tell you it's amazing how many times people ring up and say the heat isn't working, and then when the engineer gets round there, they're not in. It's kind of an emergency for them, but it's not always that way, and sometimes they do fail to turn up, and we're always on their case about that, and there is some scope for improvement there. But in terms of gas safety, I'm pleased to say we're there. And finally, you asked about the repairs call handling. It is linked slightly in that in bringing the gas repair calls into our own call centre, we also took the opportunity to bring the call handling into the council's network. Unfortunately, that has meant we've lost some of the functionality that we used to have in terms of the switchboard. Now that is going to change over the coming year, but for the moment we've lost the ability to carry out some of the measures that we used to be able to do when it was on me as a switchboard, because we actually share an office with them. The advantage to us in moving, and you might think, well, why did you do it then? The advantage is the IT side, the computer side, is much more efficient and much better. So we've gained that, but in doing so we've lost a bit of functionality. What we are doing to try and compensate for that in the meantime is carry out customer journey mapping. So we ring people up who've been through our service and ask them a series of about 20-something questions about the whole experience from the start through to the finish. How easy was it to contact us? Did you have to wait long? All those kind of things, which gets a bit more qualitative information. One of the challenges you have in running a repairs call centre is it's not how quick you deal with them, it's how well you deal with them. Because if you don't diagnose it properly, you don't then get it fixed when you go out. So people might be very happy, you've answered the call very quickly, you've dealt with them very quickly, but the repairs guy came to do the wrong thing. Not a good outcome. So we're working on that.
Right.
In a year's time, we should have some really good statistics for you on that, because we're trying to put together a whole suite.
Good. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'd say in terms of the switchboard, I mean, I never have a problem getting a quick response on the switchboard here. You know, it's always answered within 1 or 2 calls. So if you can't have the stats to show it, my impression is there's absolutely nothing to worry about there. So that's really good. In terms of key data, and I think the arrears is one of the things that I would want to see.
We've watched that like a hawk, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, it's good news. But as you say, it turns. You don't want to be waiting a long time to find out. And percentage of tenants owing more than 7 weeks rent. The thing that's on tenants evicted for rent arrears, I did ask previously, I thought was agreed, to see evictions for other reasons. I know there's not a lot of them, but I usually have more than one case in my patch where
it's getting close.
It's getting close, yeah,
Chair, that usually appears in the orange box in text if there's an eviction beyond rent arrears, because we don't have very many of those at all. So by exception, they're put in the box rather than...
Right, Helen.
Okay, thank you. Page 19, breakdown of complaints. I'm just looking at the number of complaints, and it's a number of year to date, so it works out about 100 a month, and I just wondered whether the committee felt from 9,000 properties that was a lot or not a lot. No comment?
Too many.
How many?
Too many.
Too many.
One's too many, as they say.
Because just bringing it back to EOSC, we're talking about 100 per quarter of the year from 9,000 houses. Some of us are on EOSC as well. And there's always a big discussion about the number of complaints, and yet there were 74 complaints in the quarter, equating to a service that copes with 13,000 bins per day. So I think that just puts it into perspective a little bit.
If I could just comment, Chair.
Yes, would you like to?
One of the things we particularly do is encourage complaints, and we take any comment that's made that's adverse or a comment, because that's where we learn. So we've worked very hard to move away from trying to minimise complaints to actually trying to encourage complaints, encourage comment. And so the numbers are important, but actually, how people perceive and what happens when people complain. Most of our customer service training says it's not whether you get things wrong, it's what you do when you get them wrong that really matters in terms of the customer experience.
It's the old age problem, isn't it?
And certainly in terms of customer service excellence, which we've been doing a lot of work on, they focus about a quarter of their effort in terms of inspecting us on how we deal with complaints. So we produce a lot of stats around that. And yes, you want to see them digging down as well. And look at trends. I mean, if there are trends of a lot of complaints in a particular area, then that becomes a focus. But for us, it's very much the learning from that and sharing that across the organisation. So what went wrong? Why did it go wrong? What can we learn from it? How can we stop it happening again? Or if comments are being passed, how can we learn from that?
But you can really only pick up things where you get repetition, can't you?
Yes.
If you get repetition, then you're really going to have...
You do, but also encouraging staff to report things that have gone wrong rather than feeling it's a negative. It is a positive if you turn it around.
And don't defend the indefensible.
Those sorts of things. So, yeah.
Can I just sort of add to that as well, because obviously the Trust manage more than just the 9,000 rented homes. They also manage all of the leasehold properties. They also provide the housing needs service, the waiting list service, the welfare service. And just if you look at the transaction
They're
levels,
all in here, aren't they?
they're all in here. If you look at the transaction levels in terms of repairs and gas services and so on, it soon multiplies up to a lot more than 9,000 transactions, if you like. So, and I think it's also important to note that whereas I know that bin collections are extremely important and the implications of bins not being collected is very important, but it's probably not quite as emotive as the nature of the issues that the housing trusts are dealing with either. So in terms of people maybe feeling that they want to raise a complaint, if it's about their housing application or, you know, their sort of very crucial repair in their home, they may be more inclined, whereas if the bin is missed, do you see what I mean? It's the sort of, the nature of business is a little bit different as well. So I think...
Well, let Helen have her commercial, shall we? Carry on.
Thank you. I think it is important to state that what's important is how you deal with a complaint, and I think the way that the trust deals with complaints is exceptional, absolutely exceptional. But to take Helen's point, the complaints do happen. I make complaints, and just to touch on a few things that have been said, I've phoned various maintenance lines, and I've never had it answered in a couple of rings. It does take a while usually. Maybe it's just me, but that has always been the way. But not an exceptionally long amount of time, but it's by no means rapid than what is these days. And the point about, and I'm sure when gas checks are done, and that is very obviously heavily scheduled, and that's very important obviously for reasons. But generally, maintenance, planned or otherwise, it does make me laugh sometimes. The worker will turn up the next day after you've rung up. Blimey, that's quick, but you won't know about it. So if you're in, that's a nice surprise. If you're not in, you've got a card saying, well, you weren't in when we turned up. Well, I didn't know you were turning up. So then you have to ring them again. It takes a couple of minutes then. So it's not bad, but there are certainly things that could be improved, and there always would be. Overall, I'm quite satisfied, but anyway, it's not about just me. The question I have, and I do have a question, is I was having a debate, nearly an argument, with someone recently about the buyback scheme. And I know that this has been asked before, but someone else had a different view to what I think we've been told before. And my point that I raised before about this is, obviously they're bought back at full rate, having been sold at a discount, which is just madness. What's the situation with regards to them then being right to buy again after they're bought back?
It's an interesting question you asked there, because we asked our accountant, housing accountant, to do some modelling. There is something called the cost floor, which means that for a period of time after you've either bought or invested heavily in a property, it can't be discounted below that figure. So that's one of the elements. And also then looked at modelling if somebody bought it at the end of that period, that the cost floor is protected. So what is the overall financial benefit or disbenefit to the council? And taking account of things like house price inflation and other factors in there, when you put all the factors in, there's actually a net benefit, even if somebody bought it as soon as they could at the end of that cost floor. And that's it's slightly more touch and go with flats, but certainly with houses, which is what we've been buying, it actually is cost effective to do so, even if somebody bought it immediately, that they could. That was reassuring, because we didn't actually think that would be the outcome. But that's based on house price inflation over the last 10 years, I think, when it's been reasonably flat, actually. That's the good news. It is worth doing, and it's not as cost effective as building, but we know the challenges, because we've been talking about the local plan and the shortage of land available for building. So in the short term, that's the best option, or one of the best options for us in terms of increasing affordable housing and using some of the funds we have to support that ambition.
If I can jump back to your wasted calls, shall I call it, I've noticed, nothing to do with your housing, increasing number of people ring ahead. I'm going to make a delivery to you in half an hour or something like that. So obviously, clearly, if you're, they're all technicians, they're not mechanics or engineers anymore. But if he's passing anyway, he's going to drop in. But I think there is some merit in that.
Increasingly, one of the areas we're looking to develop is that kind of customer channel access technology, using more mobile technology and texting and phoning to try and improve the service. The infrastructure isn't quite there for that yet, but we're working on it.
Well, we've got that quite a lot. That does happen.
Bring ahead.
It does increasingly happen.
Yeah. But sometimes you're like, oh, you come around in half hour, brilliant. I'm like 5 hours away. But it is very useful. We are actually, it's the most, it's better than most courier delivery systems that I've used. It's really quite good if you know them.
Okay. Right, Keith.
Mine's only a comment, Chairman, and that is that since we've taken on these new gas engineers, the residents in my village are full of compliments rather than our previous people.
I'll pass that back.
Please do.
Anything else? Right, 3-1, where recommended that we note the report. Notice. Thank you. We go on to item 8 now, shorter one, the affordable housing.
Okay, thank you.
Well done, Sharon, thank you.
I was just going to say that obviously I'm very happy to only bring this twice a year, if that's what members would like. I mean, it does strike me that with the affordable housing programme, by its very nature, because it is development, and development takes time, there's not necessarily a great deal of change other than maybe on the financial reporting from one quarter to another, but I'll leave you to sort of think about that. So, I mean, hopefully, I say the report is hopefully relatively self-explanatory. I know some of the tables in the appendices take a little bit of getting used to, but hopefully members are starting to get their head around the way that we're reporting this. And happy to take any questions. I think the only thing I'd draw your attention to is that at the moment, with our proposed activity during this financial year, we will be heading for an overspend on the actual capital budget. So that's the amount that we've placed in the budget. It's not the amount of money we've got available to spend, it's just what we've ring-fenced for this financial year. So we do intend to take a report to get that budget increased, to make sure that we don't overspend. But other than that, happy to take questions.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. First of all, I agree with you, actually, Shard. I think the numbers in this are quite important, and it's quite hard sometimes to get one's mind around it. Because of the scale of them, it's probably better to discuss it properly twice a year than superficially 4 times a year, I'd say. I just wanted to, I'll probably ask the question before and then forgotten the answer, but just clarify a couple of things. First of all, on page 35, at the bottom left, we've got funding of future plan schemes with a total of 16.9 million. Am I right in thinking that roughly relates to the figure of estimated total 113 homes on at the bottom of page 34, roughly?
Yeah.
Good, thank you. So I did a back of the envelope calculation. We've sold 18 homes in the last quarter, and I think the retained receipts are about 56,000 a piece on those. My calculation, because it costs about 150,000 for each new one we build, that would imply, according to the rules, that we have to buy, build, or cause to be bought or built 22 per quarter. And yet we've only actually managed 5 or 6 in the last quarter. So despite the fact that we've exceeded our budget, we're kind of falling behind what the target is, which is unfortunate. I know we wouldn't expect to keep up with the target straight away, but clearly if we, over the long term, if we fall behind, we're faced with either paying penalties or having to withdraw from the scheme. Have we written to the Treasury or the, I don't know who it would be, the Treasury or the DCLG, to ask for the grace period to be, it's currently 3 years, I think, to be expanded?
Yes.
And what did they say?
They said no.
Oh dear.
Yeah, we've written again, because
Yeah.
obviously we're relatively tenacious, and said, well, would you like to come and talk to us about the difficulties that we experience with your formula, with the setup of the scheme, with the rules as you've set them, so we can explain to you why it's so difficult to sort of deliver at this rate. and we're waiting to hear whether they want to come and see us. I understand, because a colleague of mine was at a seminar today, and Terry Alifat from the ECLG was there, and they did actually ask her the question, because she's sort of, the senior officer in CLG responsible for affordable housing, and apparently she laughed when they made the point that for local authorities, housing development is something that we haven't done directly for many, many years, and the question they posed was, isn't it difficult for local authorities to sort of get their framework in place, build their skill set, build their teams, and deliver within this very tight time frame? And she laughed and said, yes, some of them don't even have housing departments, but I'm sure they'll get there. So that's the kind of sympathy that central government is demonstrating. So, but we will persevere. We have pressed the point, and hopefully they will want to actually come and have some insight by visiting a local authority and seeing what's going on. Just to, in terms of your points, Duncan, about the scale of the programme and where we're up to, and if we progress at this kind of rate, the fact that we're behind the curve, if you like, in terms of delivery, we're very, very conscious of that. We've just done some work which we'll be hopefully discussing with Cabinet in the next sort of couple of months, that shows that effectively we need to be delivering probably around 350 homes within about a 4-year period. That quite a lot of that has to be reliant on buybacks, because without the land to develop, it's very difficult to meet those sorts of numbers in other ways, which is why we did the financial model to reassure ourselves that it was better to buy back homes than to give the money back to government and lose it out of the borough, which is what will happen. What that sort of calculations we're doing is that we're looking at a £70 million affordable housing programme, and at the moment we're managing what we're doing with sort of half an extra post in my team and a bit of Jeff Sampson's time kind of thing. So it's something that we need to take hold of and say, if we're going to deliver at that rate this sort of financial programme, we're going to have to resource that as well and look at this a bit more, a bit differently. And we're also going to have to think about where we're going to get the finance for the 70% match funding that we have to bring to the programme, because the HRA cannot sustain at that sort of level. So we'll need to be thinking about whether or not we want to open up the borrowing. So it's all there to be discussed. So we are having those sort of, we've put some briefing papers together, and we'll be coming back here, I'm sure, to tell you a bit more.
Yeah, thanks. As I say, I think maybe properly every 6 months is better than superficially every 3. Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Kieran.
Thank you. Yeah, on that point, in terms of asking for an extension and for them to come to explain why that might not be forthcoming, and for them to understand some of the hurdles that are put in place by the rules that they have. I certainly don't want to get part of political, but given the local political representation that we have, and that person's place in arranging some of this, obviously not in detail, but in theory, and could we not use that? Have we used that to invite them ever more so to listen to some of the difficulties that we're going to encounter by taking this very brave and correct decision to have an affordable housing programme, which I'm still very supportive of? Could we not use that local resource that we have to get them to come and listen to us?
So presumably by that you mean our MP. Yeah, we have used that connection. To be fair, we haven't shared the outcome of the first letter. He was fully supportive of the initial letter that was sent. And but yeah, we need to feed back to him and see whether we can have some influence in that area.
Good. Okay. All right, everyone.
Right, well, the recommendation is that we note the report. Agree? Thank you. Right. Long last, go on to item 9. You've been very patient, Vicky.
We'll whiz through
Away
these
you
reports.
Okay, so the first report's regarding the common car park, which I think we're all aware that we're looking to do some really sort of good aesthetic work within that area to make it look a little bit more inviting. It's probably the most used sort of shoppers car park, but it's not in a really lovely area, unfortunately. So we wanted to improve that, and not just the surface, but also sort of signage around there. We're working with the town centre team to try and put some really good signage up there, which might be something like you are here and this is where Barclays Bank is, and that sort of look and feel, so it'll look a little bit nicer. And then maybe some footprints on the ground as well, where they can sort of lead into the town centre. So basically, to do this piece of work, we had to amend the traffic regulation order because it's a map-based order, and each of the bays are actually sort of located on a map, and the restriction that's attached to that particular bay is marked out. So we did some consultation and we advertised it, and surprisingly, we didn't get any objections, which I'm assuming that once we start doing the work, they might come forth.
We'll suck them out.
The main sort of risk really was the fact that we are going to be reducing, if we're going to widen the bays, we're obviously going to be reducing the number of bays. And the only thing we could sort of justify or to sort of put sort of to show that it might or hopefully won't cause too much hassle is the fact that we did temporarily have the compound for the contractors there, which was taken away a similar amount of parking bays. And I'm hoping that by providing wider bays, it will please quite a large number of people. We do get a lot of comments about that car park, and we have done for a number of years, and this is one way of doing it. It's quite expensive just to remove the lining and put new lining back in, so by using this new surface, which there is an example of it on page 55 of it. We've already used it in other car parks within Hatfield, and it's quite bright and cheery and self-explanatory, hopefully, in terms of the colour coding as well as the signage. So hopefully, more people will be aware of the fact that if you're parked in particular coloured bays, there's a particular restriction, and take note of the signage. So really, with this report, it was just for the panel to note that there wasn't any objections, and to recommend to Cabinet to proceed with the amendment of the traffic regulation order that's named in item 8.6.
Thank you, Vicky. Well, two things. Certain people who attend to another committee are very conversant with the problems of narrow parking spaces. The colouring on page 55, I saw that, and when I saw that, I wondered if that was something from the EU, because that's something they use in France when we travel around with our disabled sticker.
It's getting more and more common, to be honest, in a lot of areas where they're doing this development.
I wondered if it came from across the water.
Well, in Hunters Bridge we've got something very similar. It's a very similar product that we use in the multi-storey, and that's due to be resurfaced as well.
Okay. Any questions? Everybody happy with that one?
Yeah, one thing I've noticed is how many bays are we losing?
28.
28. As you say, as you said, it's been suffering that anyway.
So, sorry. Oh, Keith. Yes, carry on.
It's just a quick question. Can these disabled bays be put in this particular design anywhere else, or are you just using it for the Commons car park?
We're just using it in car parks per se. Just in car parks per se, not on the street.
Okay, not in side roads or
no,
nothing like that.
No.
Okay.
In fairness, going back to my journeys on the continent, I've only seen it in car parks, not in the street.
Thank you, Chair. I think the coloured space is really effective. I think it looks quite nice. I don't know how long it takes to wear off. But also I think as we move forward with car parking in general, it seems to me, someone that never really has much cause to worry about it himself.
Oh, here we go.
It can be quite complicated, and it doesn't matter, particularly in these areas, it doesn't matter where you put the signs, how big they are, or what they say, it does seem confusing. So I think this is the best way to do it. and I think it looks nice too.
Yeah.
On the matter of the contracts, that's obviously had hoardings and things like that, they've wandered off into the sunset. Does that give us any scope to sort of look at the car parks overall and maybe increase them where possible, or is that pie in the sky for another day?
The particular area that had the compound on it, it's quite difficult to show on this map because this map would sort of look a little bit out of date, but there is 10 other private parking spaces that are associated with the old Bill Salmon Centre that's been redeveloped, and there's 3 additional paid spaces are relating to that. In terms of looking at capacity, they're pretty much as good as you can get, really, especially as there are trees and lighting in particular areas that makes it difficult to then sort of rejiggle things around. When you say look at car parking as a whole, what are you referring to? Is it to get more spaces out of the space there, or?
Yeah, I mean, in particular, that smallish area where the hoardings were up on that corner. I wondered, were you able to sort of just claim that, or I didn't know who owned it?
No, where the sort of dark outline is, that's our border.
Oh.
So they're actually on the other side of that border. And I think that, what they've tried to do to try and manage that area for those residents when they do move into those dwellings is they've put bollards in, which are now broken because people have driven over them or purposefully damaged them. So they're trying to look at that, and I've said we could help them and enforce that area if they wanted us to do that as part of a traffic regulation order, but they'd have to pay for that. It's also just to point out with these particular areas, they are contributing to the cost of maintaining those spaces. St Modwyn's, and also we've seemed to have gained 2 lamp columns as well, which they're paying £15,000 for a 10-year period for us to maintain those columns, which I'm hoping won't cost that much. So that'd be,
Right, well, this one, everyone, we're asked to note that there are no objections and recommend to Cabinet that proceed with the amendment of Traffic Regulation Order TRO named in item 8.6. That's agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Item 10, Vicky, we're on about the update of Parking Services Work Programme.
Okay, I think if you've read the report, you'll see pretty much how busy we've been, considering we're relatively a small team of 3. I know it's been quite challenging, and it's probably been my own fault, to be fair. When I set out work programmes in the past, they've probably been a bit too challenging areas in terms of just the amount of work that's involved. So for next year, in terms of what we're planning to put forward for the next year's work programme, there might just be sort of 1 additional area on there. We're hoping and quite confident that Welham Green and Brookmans Park will be completed in this financial year. There's 2 particular areas that are currently being advertised, and I don't really want to jinx it, but we haven't had any objections, which I'm quite shocked at. I don't know if there's a petition brewing somewhere that's going to come regarding Peplin's Way and Bradmore Way, but we'll see. And then there's only 1 other area there that we're looking to, and we're just waiting for the order to be agreed by HCC, and that's Brookmans Avenue, which is a piece of work we've done with the landlord of that particular road. It's public highway, but it's maintained at private expense, so they're paying for us to do the order there and all the bits and pieces, and our enforcement officers will be enforcing a traffic regulation order if that was to go in place, which is, I'm quite confident it will be. They're very much in favour in that road. And then it'd just be sort of the monitoring period of sort of 6 months afterwards. We sort of wait for, we ask residents to comment if they've got experienced problems with the new restrictions, and then hopefully those 2 areas will be sort of finished for a period of time. Cuffley, we're doing a huge piece of work on junction protection there, and there's 5 areas in total with about 30 junctions. Some of the junctions, it's removing the single yellow lines and putting double yellow lines in, which is self-explanatory and removes a lot of street clutter and generally self-enforcing. So I would imagine after that period of time, that probably will be the end of Cuffley and
Fine
Hatfield.
for a few years, as it did last time. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there has been a couple of areas of asked for the single line to be extended. In Hill-Lees, they've asked, it's quite, they would like a resident scheme, so we'll need to carry on consultation with them, but they're quite small areas and small amendments, so they shouldn't be too challenging. Just to give you an update on Hatfield, we delivered the parking questionnaire to over 5,000 residents in Hatfield East and Hatfield Central, and we had a really, really good response. We've had just over 1,000 responses to that. And there's definite, they're in the process of being collated and analysed at the moment. All the collation's done, but there's just the analysis to do on the actual responses. And there's certain areas that you can see sort of a pattern, particularly in the ride, and also sort of Sterncross, Chelwood, Betchwood. There's sort of a lot of junction protection requests for that area. And then Old Rectory Drive and French Horn Lane, which we know historically has been a particular issue there, with unrestricted parking very close to the junctions. So it was just really to give the panel a sort of an overview of what we've done so far this year, really, in terms of restrictions and improvement work. I don't know if anyone's seen in Northfield, in Hatfield, the new parking bays on housing land there. They look really nice, and it's substantial improvement on the 4 bays that were there.
Thank you. Start with Hatfield. I'm only going to talk about Hatfield. I'm the councillor at South Hatfield, and I know that Hatfield is going to be looked at in chunks, and I can appreciate why, because it's a large area with large parking problems, and everyone's area has parking problems, I appreciate. South Hatfield, I've never really had that feeling that, yes, there were parking issues in certain roads, but as I said, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but it does seem to be that problems are moving towards that area, and there's now a number of groups of residents in certain areas with very valid concerns, and I think that's going to be coming forward. So just to bring that to your and the panel's attention, that I think we're going to start to get public calls for other areas of Hatfield that are perhaps lower down in terms of the timeline to be looked at. And that's very recently starting to happen, but there are actually works scheduled to take place in South Hatfield too, going back to the affordable housing programme, where we are actually building affordable housing, and it's partly linked to that, and it does seem to be quite serious. So I'll be in touch.
Yeah, well, I came to it, as you know, that there was a meeting, sort of like a last-minute meeting that was happened in Cavendish Arms, is it?
This is on top of that.
Oh, it's on top of that. We have got some challenges in terms of particular issues. So, for example, some of the concerns that have been raised over the last few years relating to during term time is it's not just an issue during the day for those roads that are very close to the university, it's an issue on evenings in those roads that are a little bit further away, and we only enforce at the moment till 6 o'clock on a night. So it's one of the things where moving forwards as a council we might need to look at how our enforcement regime works, and if we're going to be able to provide restrictions that work for different types of areas, then that's something that we'll need to address and potentially look at having to increase the hours we enforce and potentially have to resource for that to happen, because after a certain time of 6 o'clock you have to have 2 civil enforcement officers at one time for health and safety reasons. And it is a concern of mine, and I always raise it, that the more restrictions we and the council put in, the more stretched they are, and they are pretty stretched at the moment. And the other thing is, one of the things that I am working with East Herts and Stevenage, as we share the contract with NSL, who provide that sort of frontline enforcement, is about maybe changing our regime slightly. So instead of having the mobile beats that go around to certain areas, we could maybe target a particular location like Cuffley for say 2 or 3 weeks, where we do sort of an intense enforcement, and then that should hold its own for a few more weeks to then sort of focus somewhere else, and that might be a better way of looking at our enforcement, rather than, and the other thing that has an impact, and it is really, it hits the efficiency and The service as a whole is these special requests when we get particular residents that we've had one recently in Welland Garden City that's not late, contractors parking on the yellow lines, and every time they call through it means pulling an officer away from his beat or her beat to then go in and enforce that, which generally doesn't mean issuing a ticket because they generally drive away, or it means a more of an educational approach rather than just issuing tickets, but then they have to get back on their beat again. So it's important really to sort of mention to the panel that that's something that as a council we're going to need to look at in the very near future in terms of being able to facilitate.
Right.
Quick question, Vicky, because I don't normally sit on this panel. When will you be considering the parking restrictions and improvement programme for the next year?
And we normally bring that in February, ready for March Cabinet. I mean, I have got an idea of, we have got Welland Garden City on this work programme regarding the loading bay in the town centre, and I can't see that we're going to get to it in this financial year. So obviously that normally means we move it to for the new financial year, and if that's the case, then one of my thoughts is that if we're going to do the Garden City, then it might make sense to do Hanside as a ward at the same time.
Yeah, and that would be the basis of my question. As a Hanside ward councillor, we've received so many requests, and I think it'd be good to look at it in the whole with the town centre. Yeah. Thank you.
Right, Malcolm.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, Vicky's more than aware that I've put in several requests to her some while ago, and she told me she'd get to them in 2 years, and the clock is still running, so we'll see whether you manage to achieve that.
It's in Hanside though, isn't it, Malcolm?
Yeah, they are. Yep, they are. But, you know, then I would very much hope you can move on to Pear Tree, because that is very much affected by, you know, a lot of commuter parking is now going over there. Not necessarily because of anything that's happened in the town, maybe because Hitches have put in restrictions, or somewhere else, and people say, where can I go to park?
Brooklands Park have got a really good train station that's severely underused, that's £3 a day.
I know, the train's a bit slow compared to coming from Welland Garden.
Osborne Way has got huge capacity now.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, that's the problem. I mean, some of the people who park, certainly where I live, come out of the car parks at 11 and get and infect their vehicles on us for the rest of the day. These aren't the people earning £6.50 an hour, you know, who are having to surrender an hour of their pay to park. These are people, in some cases, who own significant businesses in the town centre. These people are not short of money. They're putting BMWs and Mercs into residential roads after 11 o'clock, and I think it's scandalous. I had a question around some of these items about drop curbs and hard standings for residents. I mean, are these housing trust tenants? Right, okay, because we wouldn't be paying for this for the
private now. We don't. We don't do that. We don't even do the subsidy anymore for the. They need to go to the council for it.
But I mean, are these being paid for by the community trust? If they're putting it in for their tenant, if it's being done for one of their tenants,
no,
or are we all having to share paying for them?
It's capitally funded, so it's our program of works, and we do it on council properties, and we also try. My main aim is to try and improve communal parking where possible, right. But obviously, as a Welland Garden, as a garden city, it's getting increasingly more and more difficult with veg and trees and the amenity, and not trying to. It's that fine balance of being able to do that. So a lot of the time, those communal areas, the next one on the list is Broomfield Road in Welling, and we are doing a communal bay there for 5 to 6 vehicles. And that's ideally what we'd be looking at, rather than servicing the individual, servicing the many. But we are running out of areas in which we can do that, unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you look at it. I'm not really sure what the answer is. The statistics saying there's particular bodies that say that car ownership is going to increase by 46% between now and 2040, and considering in the last 50 years it's got a ridiculous amount from something like 2.4 million to 34 million. Unless the hovercraft car comes in, I'm really not sure what we're going to do, and we're not alone in that. This is a national issue. People are staying at home longer. It's more affordable now to have a car than it ever has been before. I'm not really sure what the answer is.
I don't think we'll worry about it.
I don't know. I can't answer it tonight. I'm sorry.
Okay, Keith, and perhaps we can wrap it up.
Vicky, you've got down here Knowles Crescent on page 53. parking, or making parking available on the green.
Mhm.
Which side of the road are we talking about?
It's on the centre of the green, as far as I'm aware. It's with Herts
It's
County
on
Council.
the even side.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need to declare an interest, Keith.
Sorry?
Do you need to declare an interest?
Well, I suppose I do.
It lives a bit further along though.
It is, yeah, it's,
Yeah.
not, it's not near where I live,
No.
it's just down the road. I've, for the last 10 years, have been against that. But I have come to the conclusion it may be needed. But my main worry is there's a lot of drainage underneath that.
Well, they'll deal with that.
Yeah, we deal with all the drainage and everything else. And if anything, we try and, to make it cost effective, we try and stay away from areas where there's land columns and that sort of thing that
Yeah.
needs to be removed, and drainage. But we deal with all the drainage as well. We put drainage in where necessary for those areas.
And just to note, it's significantly cheaper than putting in individual hard stands. It would appear. So therefore, it is something that we should be considering if we're having to.
Yeah, I mean, some of the, I mean, funnily enough, in the Hatfield consultations, some of the significant number of comments is people have had stands and don't use them, which is quite frustrating, but you can't force people to use them. And the other thing is, you may put a hard stand in, but you're also taking a parking space away as well. So I think it's quite, I mean, we've got 2 cars and only one fits on the driveway, and when we're at home, I always park on the drive and my partner parks in front of me, so it's just, not everybody is as thoughtful as that, unfortunately. I don't appreciate that can be an issue.
Okay then. Right, so the recommendation 2.1 that we note the current position on the approved parking restriction work programme, Appendix A, and we note the current position on the approved parking improvement work programme, Appendix B. Agree? Yeah. Thank you. Item 11, your swan song.
Yeah, this is just, you know, as you're all aware, this was brought up at scrutiny a few years ago, and it's sort of like the second year that we're bringing this report twice a year to the panel. And you've obviously got the charts there, and I've sort of reduced it down from what it was. I'm trying to think of the information that's probably more pertinent and interesting rather than fulfilling lots of information. So it was really, if anybody had any comments or questions with regards to the Appendix A.
I think everybody looks like they're happy with that. We'll probably asked to note it. Noted. Thank you everyone. Thank you for attention. Part 2.
No, I'm driving. I'm driving, it's a Hindu for a long way.